So I've had a great deal of respect for Zaluzhny for a long time. He did a good job as a commander until he got to that trying to cross a minefield, the Surovikin line, and he never should have been pushed to do this, given that he didn't have the air support that U.S. forces would have had trying to go through this kind of minefield. And so he was relieved by Zelensky after this terrible summer counteroffensive. But I want to talk about the bigger story around him right now. So, ex-Ukraine army chief and current ambassador to the UK, Valery Zaluzhny, refused to hold talks with Vance, who was seeking an alternative to Zelensky after the White House dispute. Remember, you didn't even say thank you. That whole dust up, that blow up in the White House. Okay, so apparently J.D. Vance reached out to Zaluzhny after that, and it was kind of interesting what actually happened. So we're going to go through some of this. Zelensky's refusal to surrender has Trump allocating the Vance team to pull all levers to rip apart the Ukrainian government. So J.D. Vance's team was on the line and wanted to set up a call with Valery Zaluzhny. Now, Zaluzhny is the ambassador to the UK. He's the former commander of the army. So the U.S. vice president had been instrumental in provoking that confrontation between Trump and Zelensky in the Oval Office. And so Vance, after that, Vance's team tried various diplomatic and other channels to get through to Zaluzhny, and Zaluzhny just kind of ditched him. He wouldn't take the call. Here we are. He refused to take the call. Okay, good on Zaluzhny, because that's really monkeying with internal Ukrainian politics and shouldn't have been doing that. Guardian, Zaluzhny holds back but keeps the door to politics open. Former commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Valery Zaluzhny, has refused to join Zelensky's party, but according to The Guardian, he does not rule out taking part in future elections. Perfectly fine. Take part in future elections. Future elections is one thing. Right now, doing this is undermining Zelensky, and then that could be kind of detrimental. I don't think that anything's going to happen there, but okay. Around the Ukrainian embassy in London, now headed by Zaluzhny, a line of political pilgrims has already formed. Lawmakers, businessmen, activists, even Donald Trump's former advisor, Paul Manafort, who offered his services. But the legendary general ignores them. Head of the presidential office, Yermak, also visited frequently, trying to persuade the general to join Zelensky's team. Zaluzhny refused, but promised not to criticize. This is good, but promises not to criticize the president until the war is over. That's a good policy for him. He's the ambassador to Great Britain. Relations between Zelensky and Zaluzhny can be described as tense. Well, there's a reason that they're tense, right? I mean, there's a lot of not seeing things the same way, but Zelensky has the final say. 2 days before the invasion, Zaluzhny and Defense Minister Reznikov insisted on imposing martial law just before the invasion. But Zelensky didn't want to do that. They put in some soft measures. They didn't want to upset the population or perhaps trigger something. Disagreements continued during the war. Zaluzhny's popularity kept growing. Zelensky's team increasingly saw him as a rival. Okay? Politically, yeah. I mean, there is that. That's legit. That's what happens in the democratic system. In February 2024, the president dismissed him. But it wasn't for politics. It was after the failed attempt to kind of break through that minefield it was doomed from the start, given what the Ukrainians actually had to fight with. Vice President J.D. Vance tried to reach out to Zaluzhny, viewing him as a possible alternative to Zelensky. That's pretty terrible. The general, after consulting with the president's office, refused to pick up the phone. Okay? Refused to pick up the phone. Later, he met Zelensky at the airport and deliberately posed for a joint photo in order to show solidarity. So I think very highly of Zaluzhny. I don't know what will happen on the other side of the war, if they'll keep Zelensky, throw him out on his ear like they did with Churchill, or bring him in a second time, or elect Zaluzhny. I just don't know. But this was played the right way. Now, let's look at other things that are going on here. Putin's main fear is another 1991. Moscow is losing central power, says Peter Pomerantsev in the Telegraph. He feeds on Western timidity. This is a really important point. Putin feeds on Western timidity. If Western timidity is there, he grows stronger. So you can't really do that. He gains when Trump treats Russia as a U.S.'s equal and makes Europe plead for approval. This makes Putin stronger. Don't do that. Now, he fears two things, okay? So his main fear is another 1991. He doesn't want things to fall apart. He also doesn't want a color revolution. He saw what happened to, like, Gaddafi, and it's like, we got to make sure that doesn't happen. Now, at the same time, J.D. Vance is talking about how this is how wars ultimately get settled. If you go back to World War II, and if you go back to every major conflict in human history, they all end with some kind of negotiation. Ben Hodges replied, was the Yale History Department closed when you were there? Like, okay, so what kind of negotiation? Go back to World War II and look at Japan's unconditional surrender. There was no negotiation. It was unconditional surrender. Branislav Slantichev, he's a professor of political science at the University of California. He put, this. He listed out, going back to World War II, Italy, no negotiations. Germany, no negotiations. Japan, no negotiations. Bulgaria, no negotiations. And then we have a few others. Pakistan, crushed. Its east becomes Bangladesh. Vietnam, U.S. negotiations to surrender. 2 years later, South Vietnam is conquered with no negotiations. Falklands, no negotiations. Iraq, no negotiations. Afghanistan, no negotiations. Libya, no negotiations. I've got more, but I think you catch my drift. Yeah. But when you say this, you preclude the possibility of actually doing what you need to do in order to win the war. Okay, Lavrov made multiple public statements last week explicitly stating Russia's war goals remain unchanged. And so here's J.D. Vance saying, I think the Russians have made significant concessions. What significant concessions did they make? Like, I don't understand this. What was actually made? Okay, Russia will have some stake in the discussions about security guarantees for Ukraine, says Vice President J.D. Vance. Why should they have a stake? I get it. They have security concerns. They're the aggressor, though. If somebody breaks into my home, what guarantees does he have that I'm not going to hurt him? Okay, how can you reasonably provide security guarantees without talking to the Russians about what would be necessary to bring the war to a close, Vance said during an NBC interview. What? I'm missing something. Okay. Putin's the obstacle, says CIA chief. This is a former CIA chief, Petraeus, and he was in command in Iraq or Afghanistan. I think it was Iraq. Did the counterinsurgency strategy there. He was a CIA chief for some time. Yeah, Putin's the obstacle. That's the problem. Recognize what the actual problem is. Adam Kinzinger posted this. He's a former Republican congressman. It said, Russia bombed an American factory in Ukraine, and Trump has been silent. Such an alpha. Yeah, it's been days, and he hasn't said anything officially other than when asked a direct question, said, I don't like it. That's it. Hasn't said, why did that happen? Aren't you supposed to be America first? Okay, less than a week after the meeting with Trump in Alaska, Putin spent more than $4 million to destroy one American consumer goods factory. It was a deliberate provocation, and that consumer goods factory wasn't even making anything military. For more than 3.5 years, Russia left Mukachevko untouched. It's a beautiful castle city tucked beyond the Carpathian Mountains, Ukraine's far west, 30 miles from Hungary. And just days after the meeting between Trump and Putin chose to slam it. Russia sent not one, but 2 Caliber cruise missiles costing $2 million each. They could have sent drones, but they were sending a clear message. Now, in light of that, we see other international events like South Korean president is seeking to bolster a U.S. alliance and economic ties, but the deepening Pyongyang-Moscow axis and Kyiv's struggle to loom large over critical White House discussions. Okay, so let's put yourself in South Korea's shoes for just a moment. You're South Korea, and North Korea is the enemy, but North Korea has gotten very close to Russia. They're allies now, and Trump is courting Russia. If you're North Korea, are you getting a little nervous? Because, I'd be a little nervous because Trump talks about how he had this great relationship with Rocket Man. He was Rocket Man before. Now Kim has a great relationship with Kim because they work something out. And Russia, and I'd be worried if I was South Korea. Poland won't be able to fund Starlink services after Ukraine for Ukraine due to President Naraki's veto of aid law for Ukrainian refugees. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Digital Affairs has said, okay, so that's kind of bad news for Ukraine if this is actually what's going to happen. I saw this commentary and I thought, there's something really fundamentally, like if I was Ukrainian, I'd be pulling my hair out here. France and Spain buy Russian liquefied natural gas. Italy refuses to buy Ukrainian weapons from the U.S. Russia and Russian tourists are swarming all over Europe. Cyprus and Malta sell passports to Russian oligarchs. Greek fleets keep shipping sanctioned Russian oil. The Greeks are really behind most of that. They concluded Ukraine has the worst allies. There is something to that. Now, they also have some good allies. The European Union just delivered 4.5 billion, or that's euros, or 4.7 billion US dollars in financial support to Kyiv on Ukraine's 34th Independence Day just yesterday. And then Norway just kicked in another 8.45 billion to Ukraine for 2025-2026. And then Germany is kicking in 9 billion euros in aid over the next 2 years, according to the finance minister. So some things are going the right direction. Ukraine should receive security guarantees, according to Germany's foreign minister, that come very close to what NATO membership means. It should be so close that it's indistinguishable. It should be NATO membership. We cannot demand that Ukraine seriously consider territorial concessions if it does not receive at least real security guarantees from as many states as possible, so that at least the rest will be safe. I don't like this language of at least the rest will be safe. Like that I find troubling, but the security guarantees are good. Zelensky said this: slowly and surely, it's becoming clear that what is now the strongest army in Europe is admittedly as important for European security as Europe is for Ukrainian security. I think that's right. I think as Russia has gone to this war footing and Putin's appetite has grown, that's a very true statement. Okay, reading Russian papers, Steve Rosenberg points out what's in the papers today: business stagnation. 1 in 2 Russians are looking for a second job, and gas prices are now hitting a new record high. That's what's in the papers in Russia today. But never fear, because Kadyrov's son has just gotten another medal. Razvan Kadyrov's son gets yet another medal, Defender of the Chechen Republic. This award was handed to him personally by Chechnya's interior minister at the closing ceremony of a tactical shooting championship among security forces. Curiously, Adam Kadyrov did not take part in the competition. He only showed up for the ceremony. It looks like the Chechen leader's son is growing into a true hero. The number of awards that he has gotten, it would just curl your hair. But they're setting him up to be the next Grand Poobah or whatever it is in Chechnya. All right, my friends, that's all that I have. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.